There's going to be red marks and lines and notes, and you're going to feel like you're back in high school English. Hey everyone, it's Jenna Harte here with Write with Harte, and today I want to talk about getting critique. Critique is a really important part of writing. It is going to make you a much better writer. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to find holes in your story, areas that you're not clear. The problem with critique is it can be really, really difficult to take. And in fact, what the first reaction often is to critique is to want to defend or explain what you were trying to say in your writing. And the problem with that is if the person didn't understand what you were saying, it means that your writing wasn't doing the job it was supposed to be doing. So this is where critique comes in really handy, because it's going to help you to choose better words or explain things better or fill in holes and things like that. But it does take an ability to hear it, digest it, and use it if it's going to be helpful. So I wanted to give you 7 tips to taking and using critique. So the first tip is to take a breath and keep an open mind. A lot of critique you're going to get is going to be excellent stuff that you need to really consider and use. Other stuff is going to be not so good, and stuff that doesn't fit or doesn't work or just is no good. On occasion, there's going to be a critique person who maybe their critique delivery might be aggressive or assertive, or maybe seems mean. Most critique groups try to weed those people out, but on occasion, something can be said that might feel harsh. And all of that, when it's negative, can be hard. So you need to, when you're ready to get critique, you need to take a deep breath. Now, this is whether you're in a critique group and people are verbally telling you stuff, or sometimes you're going to get critique back, say, from your editor, and there's going to be red marks and lines and notes, and you're going to feel like you're back in high school English. But just take a deep breath and try to go through everything with an open mind. When I get stuff back from my editor in particular, I go through the whole manuscript first, reading everything that is there, so I'm able to sort of see it and digest it. And then the next time through, if I had a negative reaction to it the first time, the next time through, I can look at it with more objective eyes. The second tip for taking critique is detach yourself from the writing. Sometimes critique can feel like a personal attack. Most critiquers are very good about just addressing the writing, but every now and then there's somebody in there who's going to, say something that makes it seem like it reflects on you as a person. They're no good. What you need to remember is that the critique is based on you as a writer, not as you as a person. So if somebody is not liking the writing, that doesn't mean they don't like you. Okay? Number 3. Sometimes you are going to know that something isn't working with your writing. You're just not clear on what it is, or maybe you have questions about whether something worked. So if that is the case, you can ask your critique group about that. I generally like to help my critique group out by letting them know areas that I'm struggling with. So if I've delivered something to them and I can say, based on what you have read with me before, does this seem like something the character would do? Or does the dialogue flow? Or does this make sense? So if there's a specific issue that you want to know about, be sure to let them know in advance, because not all people are very good at giving critique. And so I've had situations where, I get no feedback. So I know it's not bad. There's nothing obviously wrong with it. But not getting any feedback isn't helpful either. So sometimes if I'm with a group of people that maybe don't automatically find things, I might let them know this is the issue that I'm having. And so I can help guide them towards things that I think are important, that at least I want to know about. So if that's the issue, be sure to let them know that is something that you have a concern about your writing with. All right, let's go on to tip number 4. Listen to the critique without judgment and don't interrupt. This may be the hardest task there is in critique, which is to have somebody tell you something about the writing that is maybe not negative, but something that they feel can be improved or maybe needs work. And your immediately response is to defend it, or, say what you meant to say, or what you were going for, or whatever. I would encourage you just to listen, take notes, and you don't have to poo-poo it or reject it immediately. I'm always, listen to what they say. Even if my initial response is, that's not a critique I'm going to take, I don't tell them that. I just nod and write it down. I listen to everything. At sometimes your critique group, they might ask you questions about it, in which case, obviously, you're going to answer. And at the end of the critique, you might say something, letting them know what you were trying to do. And then sometimes they can give you feedback on that. So if you do say something, well, my intention here was to do such and such, and clearly that didn't happen, where do you think it went wrong? Then they can give you feedback on that as well. But the initial time, you need to really listen, just sort of take the punches if there are any. Try not to attack back or be defensive. Just listen and take notes on what they're saying. Okay, tip number 5 is to ask questions. Sometimes you'll get critique back that is not clear. This is especially too if they've gone through your manuscript and they've written notes about it. But even sometimes if you're in a situation where they're giving verbal feedback to you, sometimes people will say things that don't make any sense to you. I've had critique where I've wondered if they were critiquing the document I sent them and not somebody else's. So if you have questions, if you don't understand what they're saying in terms of what needs work or what is wrong or what they didn't like or whatever, it's okay to ask questions to get clarity on what they said to you. And you can do that without being defensive, but it is important to have a tone that says that you are accepting what they're saying, not that you'll change it, but that you've heard it with an open mind, and you just want clarity about what it is that they're trying to tell you. So you don't want to do it in a defensive tone. You want to do it in a tone that says, I'm listening to what you're saying, but it's not clear to me. Can you please explain to me in more detail what you're trying to say to me? Okay, tip number 6 is to say thank you. I always say thank you after I get a critique because first of all, it takes people's time. You're working on your own writing. You might have your own leisure reading, and now you're agreeing to read or sit and listen to somebody else's stuff. And a lot of times the stuff that you're going to be critiquing or listening to may not be related to what you're writing. I have a poet that sometimes comes to our group. I know nothing about poetry. I'm not a very good critiquer of poetry, but I always try to have something positive to say about it. I can at least give my feelings about what I thought in reading or listening to the poem. And he always says thank you because, poetry in some ways is like art. There's people that know it and understand it and study it. And then there's other people that don't know anything about it, but, have sort of an emotional response to it. So I'm able to give him that. But again, it takes time to give critique, particularly if they're reading in advance, particularly if they're reading several people's in advance. Sometimes it can be harder if they're reading a genre that maybe they're not used to. So I always say thank you, whether I'm going to use their critique or whether I'm not. I just thank them for their time, thank them for their feedback. And finally, tip number 7 is to reflect and edit. So now that you have all this critique, you have to decide what you're going to do with it. I get a lot of good feedback from my critique groups, and so a lot of it I go back and deal with. And sometimes it's a little change. It's adding a couple words to bring clarity to what I meant. Or sometimes if there's multiple people in a scene, it's going back and making sure it's clear who's talking and who's doing what. Sometimes I get critique that I don't take. I used to have beta readers. I still do have beta readers, and I do highly recommend beta readers as your manuscripts get close to being done. But I had a beta reader that sometimes used to send things back, and she would change words in some of my sentences. And sometimes these words would actually be better words. They would be more descriptive of what I was trying to say. But other times they were words that were more fitting with her voice and style of writing, not mine. So I wouldn't use them. I wouldn't accept that change that she suggested. Now, I never went back and said, well, I'm not going to use that, or that idea's dumb, or that wouldn't work. I always do step 6. I thank them for their critique. And then when I get home and I'm revising and editing and looking at the feedback, I take the stuff that, I feel, yes, this would make my manuscript better. And I ignore the stuff that I think won't make it better. I could be wrong about that. The truth is, writing and critiquing and editing a lot of times can be a subjective thing. It isn't always set in stone about what should be done. So I just go with what I feel like, yeah, that was really good constructive criticism. And then the ones that I feel wasn't very helpful, I just ignore it. But I don't let people know what I've used and not used. Again, I just thank them for their time. So those are some tips on how to accept and deal with critique, whether it's from a critique group that you're in, which I do highly recommend, whether it's from beta readers, which I also recommend, or maybe it's from your agent or editors that have sent back stuff. And I'm going to tell you, honestly, I've had editors send back stuff in a couple of books where, and these are older books, these aren't current books that I have going on, where I've gotten in, my initial reaction has been pretty severe and wanting to write back like, what are you talking about? And just feeling sort of crazed about the whole thing. But, you take a deep breath and I kind of look what they're saying. Now, when it's an editor for publishing, I a lot of times do have to respond about what I'm going to change and not change. And so sometimes it's just a matter of explanation. So sometimes, no matter what you do, you're going to have a strong response to an edit. And the trick is to just kind of hold it in, and then, really try and look at it from an objective point of view and figure out what they're trying to tell you. So again, you want to take critique and editing with an open mind, even though it's going to make you crazy sometimes, and then take what is going to make your manuscript better and ignore what isn't going to make it better. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I hope that you will click the subscribe and the bell so you can be notified of new videos that come up to help you with writing and publishing and marketing genre fiction. And until next time, this is Jenna Harte telling you to write on.